In the quiet town of Willow Creek, nestled between the rolling hills and lush green fields, there lived a woman named Sarah. She had recently moved to a picturesque farmhouse with her 2 children, Liam and Emma. The house had been in a bit of disrepair, but Sarah was determined to restore it and create a loving home for her family. Her days were filled with chores, planting flowers, and teaching her kids about farm life. As Sarah settled into her new home, she became aware of the Homeowners Association, known as the HOA. It was mostly a group of older residents, some of whom took their roles very seriously. Among them was a woman named Karen, known far and wide in the neighborhood for being particularly strict about the rules. Karen had lived in Willow Creek for many years and believed she was a guardian of the community. One summer afternoon, while Sarah was fixing up her garden with Emma, Karen marched over with a stern look on her face. "Sarah, you need to do something about those chickens clucking all day long," she scolded. "They are making it impossible for the neighbors to enjoy their peace." Sarah tried to explain that the chickens were part of their new life on the farm, giving them fresh eggs and teaching the kids responsibility. But Karen wouldn't listen. "This is a residential area, not a farm. I'll have to bring this up to the board," she warned. Sarah sighed, hoping it wouldn't come to that. A few days later, things took a wild turn. Sarah was in the barn, taking care of the animals when she heard the loud sirens of a police car. Confused, she walked outside to see Karen standing near her driveway, pointing at her chickens and barn. 2 police officers were talking to her, and it was clear she was making some accusations. "Officer, I need you to take care of this," Karen said, her voice filled with authority. "This is an illegal farm. There shouldn't be animals here." The officers turned to Sarah. "Ma'am, can you explain why you have chickens in a barn in a residential area?" one of them asked. Sarah was taken aback, but calmly explained the situation. "I'm just trying to raise my children with a little farm life. We follow the rules of the HOA as much as we can." As Sarah spoke, it quickly became evident that Karen was exaggerating. The officers took note and nodded, but then Karen piped up again. "I swear, they're making all sorts of noise at night, too. It's a complete nuisance." Hearing this, the officers looked at each other. They could see that Karen was not being truthful, and they began to realize that her complaint was a personal attack on Sarah. Before they could say anything further, however, Karen's frustration exploded. "You can't just let her do whatever she wants," she shouted. The officers, trying to keep their composure, explained that Sarah wasn't breaking any laws. In fact, Karen was the one being confrontational. When the officers mentioned this to her, she became defensive. "I'm just trying to keep this neighborhood peaceful," she yelled. Eventually, in a twist of events, the officers had no choice but to ask Karen for her identification. They soon discovered that she had a history of making false claims about her neighbors and had been warned multiple times. This time it was enough. Karen was taken to the police car in handcuffs, shouting about how she would get revenge. As the days went by, Sarah breathed a sigh of relief. Perhaps Karen would finally leave them alone. But that wasn't the end of it. Karen, in a fit of anger, started plotting her revenge. She went door to door, trying to sway the other residents against Sarah and her family. Karen painted Sarah as a troublemaker who did not belong in their neighborhood. Many neighbors began turning against Sarah. They received complaints about her kids playing too loudly and her pets roaming freely. Sarah felt isolated and hurt. She had only wanted to create a happy home, but it seemed that Karen would not let her succeed. One rainy afternoon, Sarah received an unexpected visit from Mrs. Thompson, an elderly woman who had lived in Willow Creek for decades. "Sarah, dear, I've heard some troubling things lately," she began. "I know Karen can be a bit much, but I want you to know that not everyone feels that way. People like you and your family. We need some new life around here." Sarah listened intently as Mrs. Thompson shared her experiences with Karen. "Don't let her bring you down. We want you here. Let's organize a small gathering so people can see who you really are," she suggested. Sarah agreed, but felt a little nervous. On the day of the gathering, Sarah prepared her home, decorated the porch, and laid out refreshments. As guests arrived, she noticed anxious faces, worried about what Karen might say. Sarah welcomed everyone with a warm smile, shared delicious snacks, and talked about her family's dream of farm life. As people ate and chatted, Sarah felt the atmosphere lighten. They played games, laughed, and even let the children run around the backyard. For the first time, Sarah felt like she was part of the community. Just as things were going well, Karen showed up. She attempted to disrupt the gathering by making loud complaints about noise and farm animals. But the residents turned to her, speaking out against her accusations. "We love having Sarah here. She makes our community better," said Mrs. Thompson. Feeling defeated, Karen retreated, but not before throwing one last glare at Sarah. That evening, the neighbors rallied around Sarah, promising to support her against Karen's claims. Together, they decided to take action against Karen's harassment. Days turned into weeks, and Karen's power diminished as her false complaints were exposed. With the support of the community, Sarah and her kids thrived. They grew vegetables, had lots of fun, and learned valuable life skills on their little farm. In the end, Sarah not only defended her home, but also forged lasting friendships with her neighbors. The town of Willow Creek became a place of unity, and Karen faced the consequences of her actions. Sarah smiled every day, knowing she stood strong, and that kindness prevailed in the end. Once upon a time in a small town called Maplewood, a trouble brewed between a farmer and a homeowner association lady, known to everyone as Karen. Karen lived in a neat house with a white picket fence and cared a lot about the neighborhood rules. She believed every home should look perfect, almost like a postcard. When she looked out her window, she could see Farmer Joe's farm, which was not like her house. It was filled with crops, animals, and a lot of life. Farmer Joe was a kind man, full of laughter and joy. His farm was his pride. He had cows, chickens, and a beautiful vegetable garden. In his heart, he wished to share his farm life with the town, but some believe his farm didn't belong among the perfect houses. One sunny morning, while Joe was tending to his chickens, Karen peeked over her fence, hands on hips and a frown on her face. She had gathered enough of her complaints about Farmer Joe. "That man's farm is ruining the beauty of our neighborhood," she thought to herself. So she decided to take action. Without thinking twice, she called the police. "Hello, officers," she said, her voice shaky with fake concern. "There's a crazy farmer in our town. He has loud animals, and his farm looks like a mess. Please come quickly." Minutes later, 2 police cars pulled up in front of Joe's farm. Joe was surprised to see them and waved. "Hi there. How can I help you?" he asked, wiping his brow with a rag. "Mr. Joe," the officer said, glancing around, "we have a complaint about your farm." The officer explained how Karen felt that the farm was ruining the neighborhood. Joe couldn't believe his ears. "But this is my life. I feed the town with fresh vegetables," he exclaimed, trying to explain his side. "That may be true, but we have to check," said the officer, who slowly walked around. They took notes, and after a few moments, they shook their heads. "There's no real problem here." They left Joe with a polite smile, but didn't have to arrest him. When Karen heard the news, she became furious. She was not used to being ignored. "I'll show him not to mess with me," she vowed. In the days that followed, Karen's anger grew like weeds in her garden. She plotted her revenge. She took pictures of Joe's farm at strange angles, aiming to make it look worse than it was. "Everyone will see that I'm right," she thought. Then one night, while Farmer Joe was sleeping, Karen snuck onto his property. She threw trash around, spilling a little here and a bit there, trying to make it look like the farm was messy. She laughed to herself as she imagined the townsfolk gasping in horror at Joe's farm. But her plans soon went sideways. The next morning, Joe woke up early to tend his animals. When he saw the trash, he scratched his head, completely confused. "I don't remember leaving this here," he muttered to himself. Joe cleaned everything up, not knowing who was behind it. However, he started to notice other strange things happening. His vegetables were being picked at odd times, and a few of his chickens went missing. "This isn't normal. Something fishy is going on," he said to himself, feeling uneasy. The tension grew, and soon word spread around town about Karen's strange behavior. People began to notice how she was always staring at Joe's farm, her eyes filled with jealousy rather than pride. They even started calling her HOA Karen behind her back. Feeling cornered and desperate, Karen decided to take one last step, the step that would change everything. She marched into the town meeting, her voice loud and clear. "I demand that Farmer Joe's farm be shut down," she yelled, her face red with anger. "He's ruining our neighborhood." The room went silent. Many folks in Maplewood knew Joe. They loved seeing him at the market, selling his fresh tomatoes and pumpkins. They remembered how he had given away free food during the last harvest festival. People started to shout back, "No way," and leave Joe alone. Realizing she was losing, Karen grew even more frantic. In her frustration, she lied again. "He has wild animals. He is letting them roam around." Just then, the mayor stood up. "Karen, do you have proof?" Karen panicked. She had none. "Well, I just know," she stuttered. At that moment, one of the townsfolk, Mr. Thompson, stood up. "I live right across the street from him, and I have never seen anything unusual." Joe felt a wave of gratitude wash over him. Fearing the table was turning against her, Karen's face turned white. "You don't understand. He is a danger to our homes," she screamed, her eyes wild. The mayor called the police, and soon officers arrived, having been alerted by the disturbance. They listened to Karen's wild claims and observed her erratic behavior. It was clear that her obsession with Farmer Joe had overtaken her mind. In disbelief, the police arrested her for making false claims and causing a scene. As they escorted her out, she shouted, "You'll regret this. I'll ruin you, Joe. You'll see." The town gathered to watch as Karen was taken away. Farmer Joe felt bad for her, but also relieved. After everything that had happened, he was happy to stand firm with the support of his community. As time passed, Karen's actions faded into a story told around town. Farmer Joe continued tending to his farm, living happily and sharing his food with neighbors. And the bond within Maplewood grew stronger, knowing that kindness and truth would always win over malice and lies. Farmer Joe learned that sometimes storms might come, but with love and good neighbors, he could weather anything. And in a way, he even hoped for Karen's recovery, hoping she'd find joy in her own life someday. It all started with Henrietta Higgins, the self-proclaimed queen of our little suburban homeowners association. I called her Henrietta to her face, but everyone else whispered HOA Karen behind her back. And believe me, she earned it. My name is Sam, and I'd moved to Willow Creek Estates a few years back, lured by the promise of peaceful living and manicured lawns. What the brochure conveniently left out was the iron fist of Henrietta and her army of rule-obsessed neighbors. I wasn't exactly the HOA's ideal resident. See, I had this dream of turning my modest backyard into a miniature farm. Not a commercial operation, mind you, just a few chickens, a small vegetable garden, and maybe a goat or two down the line. I loved the idea of fresh eggs, homegrown tomatoes, and escaping the soul-crushing monotony of my office job. The chickens were my first offense. Apparently, Clause 3.12, subsection B of the HOA agreement explicitly prohibited fowl of any kind within the community. Henrietta, armed with a printed copy of the agreement and a sneer that could curdle milk, descended upon my property within hours of the chickens' arrival. "These creatures are a blight on our community," she declared, pointing a manicured finger at my bewildered hens. "They must be removed immediately." I tried to reason with her, explaining that the chickens were quiet, well-behaved, and provided me with delicious eggs. But Henrietta wasn't interested in reason. She threatened fines, legal action, and even hinted at the possibility of forcibly removing my beloved birds. I fought back, of course. I researched the HOA rules, attended meetings, and even started a petition to amend the foul clause. I garnered some support from other residents who were tired of Henrietta's tyranny, but she was a formidable opponent. She knew the rules inside and out, and she wasn't afraid to use them to her advantage. The battle escalated. Henrietta started documenting every perceived violation of my property. My grass was too long, by 1/4 of an inch, according to her meticulous measurements. My garbage cans were left out for too long. My garden gnomes were offensive to the aesthetic sensibilities of the community. Then came the goats. I hadn't actually gotten any goats yet, but Henrietta was convinced I was planning to. She claimed she heard goat-like noises coming from my property in the middle of the night. She even presented blurry photos of what she claimed were goat tracks in my flower beds. That's when she crossed the line. One sunny afternoon, I was tending to my tomato plants when a police car pulled up to my house. Two officers emerged, looking grim. "Mr. Davis," one of them asked, "we receive a report of animal abuse on your property. We need to inspect your farm." I was stunned. Animal abuse? I love my chickens. I treated them like royalty. I led the officers to the backyard, where my chickens were happily pecking in the grass. They looked perfectly healthy and content. The officers looked around, confused. "Ma'am said you were neglecting your animals, depriving them of food and water," one of them said. She said they were visibly distressed. That's when I saw Henrietta, standing across the street, a smug look on her face. The officers questioned her, and her story quickly fell apart. She couldn't provide any evidence of animal abuse. In fact, she admitted she hadn't even been on my property to see the chickens up close. That's when they arrested her for filing a false police report. I watched in disbelief as they led Henrietta away in handcuffs. A wave of relief washed over me. I had finally won, but my victory was short-lived. Henrietta's arrest seemed to snap something inside her. She became obsessed with destroying me, with ruining my life. It started with anonymous letters to my employer, filled with fabricated stories about my unprofessional conduct and questionable character. Then came the vandalism. My car tires were slashed, my garden was uprooted, and someone spray-painted "Goat Lover" on my front door. I installed security cameras, but the vandalism continued. Henrietta was careful not to get caught on camera. She was like a ghost, a shadow, always lurking, always plotting. I was living in a state of constant anxiety. Every day brought a new form of harassment, a new attempt to break me. I started to feel like I was losing my mind. I considered moving, selling my house, and escaping Henrietta's wrath. But I refused to let her win. This was my home, my dream. I wasn't going to let some crazy HOA lady drive me away. I decided to fight back, not with petty vandalism or false police reports, but with intelligence and strategy. I started documenting everything. Every act of vandalism, every harassing phone call, every anonymous letter. I built a case against Henrietta, piece by piece. I also reached out to other residents who had been victimized by Henrietta's reign of terror. I discovered that I wasn't the only one. There were dozens of people who had suffered from her relentless enforcement of the HOA rules. Together, we formed a coalition, a united front against Henrietta. We gathered evidence, shared stories, and supported each other through the ordeal. Finally, we had enough. We took our case to the HOA board, presenting them with a mountain of evidence of Henrietta's harassment and abuse of power. The board was shocked. They had no idea the extent of Henrietta's behavior. They voted unanimously to remove her from her position as president of the HOA. But that wasn't enough. We wanted her held accountable for her actions. We took our evidence to the police, who launched a full investigation. The investigation uncovered a pattern of harassment, vandalism, and even stalking. They had enough evidence to charge Henrietta with multiple crimes. The trial was a media circus. The whole town was talking about the HOA Karen who had gone crazy trying to destroy her neighbor. Henrietta tried to defend herself, claiming she was just trying to protect the community. But the evidence was overwhelming. She was found guilty on all charges. She was sentenced to community service and ordered to stay away from me and my property. It was finally over. The relief I felt was immense. I could finally relax, breathe, and enjoy my little farm without fear. Henrietta's reign of terror was over, and Willow Creek Estates could finally return to being a peaceful community. I still have my chickens, and I even got those goats I was dreaming of. They roam freely in my backyard, munching on grass and bringing joy to my life. And every time I see them, I think of Henrietta, the HOA Karen who tried to destroy me. And I smile, because I won. A young woman, light-skinned with dark hair, is handcuffed to a police officer. They are standing on a gravel road, next to a white farmhouse, surrounded by rural farmland. The woman is on the left side of the image, in the mid-ground. The officer is on her right, a few feet away. The woman is facing slightly to the right, and looking forward, and the officer is facing forward as well. Both are wearing casual clothing. She has blue jeans and a dark top, and the officer has a dark uniform. A white police car is positioned to the right of the subjects. The road is a light gray color, and the farmland is a mixture of brown and green, with rows of plowed earth. The farmhouse is a pale white, with a slightly weathered appearance. The overall image has a realistic style, with natural light and a somewhat dramatic feel, emphasizing the arrest scene. The perspective is high angle, giving a broader view of the rural setting. The composition is simple and direct, focusing on the interaction between the woman and the officer.